How's it going, everyone? We have a guest with us today. Our guest is Lee. How are you this afternoon?
Good in yourself, and hello to everybody.
I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. So, how long have you been practicing for?
Um, this is always a difficult question because do we mean practicing as in when we started thinking about it or when we actually started practicing? Um,
Sure.
so to give you the long-winded answer, um, I picked up my first book on occult, which was actually Lobsang Rampa when I was 12. I was kind of a lonely kid. We just moved to South Africa a year before then, and I kind of put myself into the public library, sat on the floor, and just read. So it was Lobsang Rampa, ESP, all of all that stuff that you're interested when you're a kid. I first started practicing. First time I actually sat down and did some kind of witchcraft practice was 1995. I think actually can't remember how old. 24, I think.
Okay. All right. That the images of being a teenager in the library studying books on ESP and psychic phenomena definitely rings a bell for me.
Yeah,
Sounds very
I think it does for
familiar.
a lot of people.
Yeah, I think so too. And so what got you interested in the first place? Just sort of being more solitary and wondering if there was more behind the veil or
Yeah, actually I had a friend many years back who I called the weird what was it, the weird walker or the weird teller or something like that. Whenever he got drunk, he used to tell people exactly what they were like. He used to tell them their history, their future, everything. It was like they read their weird. It was really strange. And he actually sat me down one day and said, "Why did you get into the occult?" And I said, "To understand the universe, to get the
uh-huh.
truth." He said, "No, that's a lie." And he said to me, "Come back when you got the right answer." And for 2 weeks, I kept going back to him and giving him different answers. And eventually, he sat me down. And he said, "No, it was to gain power over your bullies because I
Ah,
was bullied when I was a kid." So I think when we face the reality of things, it's quite different to what we thought it might be. You know,
certainly. Yeah. And
so
and
it
I
gets
I think
interesting.
go ahead. I think that's interesting as well. And I think it's very important to know the true the truth of your ambitions so that they don't overwhelm you in a sort of subconscious or unconscious way.
Yeah. I think obviously we have a starting point. I think if we're honest with ourselves what that was, we know where we're going or where we've come from.
Exactly.
But obviously that develops over time. Over the past 30-ish years, it's become a lot different. I don't have bullies anymore, so
Yeah, my one of my mentors once told me that magic would give me the power to destroy my enemies. Little did I know that a very large part of that would be because I would either not care about them anymore or they would become my friends.
Yeah.
Same with mind control. He promised me mind control. Little did I know that that was mostly the control of my own mind.
Very true. Very true.
So,
Yeah.
so you mentioned that he was a weird walker. Is that in like a sort of Seether Galder type sense of like the web of weird?
He actually had absolutely no interest in spirituality or magic or anything like that.
Okay,
Absolutely none. But when he got drunk, he just became this completely different person. And I just used to tell him he could read people's weird. And he
that's
said, "Yeah,
so
okay,
cool.
whatever."
Yeah, okay, what that's hilarious. It's almost like he put himself into like a sort of like hypnagogic state where he just opened himself up to
Yeah,
like you said, people's weird. That's a very interesting way of explaining that.
yeah. It was interesting to watch actually
I'm
and
sure it
experience.
was.
Mm.
So he didn't read tarot or anything like that. He would just could look right into them.
No, he was raised Catholic and he rejected the whole thing. He had no
Okay.
interest.
Very, very interesting. So is there a favorite type of practice when you reflect on the things that you've done over the years? Is there something that sort of you can say, okay, yeah, that certainly defines my practice?
As far as defines goes, probably energy work. I think that's
Okay.
my main area is I'm a healer,
Okay.
energy healer. And I think that's where my main focus is with magic, spell work, everything really. I, I I'm able to raise a lot of energy, and then direct it. I think some people have kind of difficulty. That's why working with groups is actually quite important, because one person may be able to raise the energy, another
Mhm.
person may be able to actually take that and direct it. But I seem to be okay with the directing part. So
That's
definitely.
an excellent point. I have not come across that perspective too often. Typically, in most group workings that I've found, it's like everybody's trying to do the same thing at
Mm,
different times. But I love that synergistic component of, like one person being the string of the bow, one person being, the arrow, sort of thing. That's
mm.
a wonderful perspective. Is there any specific techniques that you use to raise energy?
I actually use spontaneous singing a lot.
Excellent.
It got introduced to me when I was studying practical Kabbalah,
Okay.
and I found, when you let the energy take over and you let it flow the way it needs to flow, and the sound just comes out of your mouth, just totally letting go, then the flow of the energy becomes so potent, so powerful, and you can direct it with your consciousness into whatever you want it to be, whether it's healing, whether it's, I mean, I use it for everything really. I use it for healing. When I'm doing invocations, I start spontaneous singing to the deities or the demons, etc. And it comes through quite potently for me. I don't suppose it would work for everybody, but for me, that's my kind of go-to. Mhm.
Certainly. I could definitely see how that would not only raise energy, but put you in sort of um a receptive state of, because I'm a musician as well, so when it comes to improvisation, you really have to put the ego and the intellectual mind aside, and it
Mm.
sounds sort of like that's what you're doing.
It kind of is, yeah, because you have to, as I said, you have to let go. For me,
Hmm.
letting go is very difficult. I'm kind of a very logical person, so I like to be in control all the time. So for me to let go to something
Hmm.
is kind of difficult. But with that, when I start singing and it just starts flowing as it should, it feels so wonderful as well. I want to let go then.
Yeah,
You know?
sure, absolutely. It reminds me a lot of what I call twilight tongue, which is,
Yeah,
just, yeah, very cool. I
yeah,
I love that
wonderful
idea.
term. Like that term actually, twilight time. Yeah.
Very cool. So you mentioned that you do a lot of healing. How else has magic changed your life for the better over the years?
I think it's allowed me to understand cycles,
Mhm.
the cycles that we go through naturally. And, the difficult thing is when it comes to cycles is that we actually fight against them all the time. And it's because of our society. There's nothing we can do about it. We have to get up at 9, go to work, or whatever time, go to work, come home from work, go to sleep, and we have to do that the whole year round.
Mhm.
Winter time, summertime. So we ignore the cycles, and that can have a real toll on our being. So I think it's allowed me to understand those cycles and try to work with the cycles so things are easier for me.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah, it's interesting how there's so much of a balance, because certainly there's a power to putting yourself on your own rhythm to sort of be a rock in a river and, set your own pace, but then there's also like the circadian rhythm,
mm,
of being, rising with the sun and falling with the sun. So there's a certain power to that balance, I think.
yeah, and I mean something like Ayurvedic
Mhm.
spirituality.
Sure.
The different times of the day
Mhm.
with Pitta and such. Actually fitting with that. Actually, just to tell a little story, I had difficulty with digestion for a long time, and antacid just galore. Every day I'd be popping Rennies or something to try and keep the acid away. And I changed, just a very simple change, and I've fitted in with the cycles that's spoken about in Ayurveda. So I eat my main meal at around 12 o'clock now, midday.
Mhm.
No problems, absolutely no, all gone.
Wonderful.
So, just fitting in with the cycles, but it becomes very important actually, and I think we can see it if we do it. Mm.
Absolutely. Yeah, I struggled with digestion a lot. I was in and out of the hospital for years and years, and they couldn't figure out what was going on with me. And one of the things that I changed was not only my perspective of things, but when I started eating my main meal. And it seems like I gave
Mm.
myself more time to digest, so I wasn't plopping down steak and potatoes 2 or 3 hours right before I laid down.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful to hear. I'm glad that you got that figured out, because that can cause a lot of other issues. It can cause mental issues, it can cause energy issues, it can cause,
Mm.
a perspective poison, I guess one might call it. But yeah, so is that
Mm.
something that you could talk to us about? Is the Ayurvedic cycles throughout the day? Are there like five main ones? Are there 12 main ones? How does that work?
There's actually three cycles. I'm now forgetting the names. There's Pitta, Kapha, and now I've forgotten the third one now. But to try and put it in simple terms, so you've got the three cycles, and each cycle lasts 4 hours.
Okay.
So during the day, you've got the 12 hours, and then during the evening, it repeats again. So between your 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. is a very meditative time. It's a very still time, very peaceful. And it's actually a time, they speak about in the Hindu tradition. If you have a shower between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., it's actually a tradition to do a shower
Mhm.
then, because
Mhm.
that's when the sattvic energy is actually quite active.
Okay.
So when you do the shower, you're also cleansing yourself energetically.
Yeah.
So that's when I have my shower in the morning. So I don't just clean myself, my body physically, I clean myself energetically every
Yes.
day. And then we start moving into a period where it's a bit more slumpish.
Mhm.
So it's your breakfast time, and it's the starting of the day. So that's 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. It's kind of slow and sluggish and stuff like that. And then we get into the fiery time, which is 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. That's the active time. And that's the period when your digestive system is really active. And that's why you should eat it, around about midday, because then your digestive system can really take that and do what it needs to do.
Okay.
And then again, it repeats itself through. And, if you, for instance, if you don't go to sleep before 10 p.m., you're back into that pitta, that fiery time again. So it becomes very active, which is why people find it difficult to fall asleep after 10 p.m. usually, unless you're taking sleeping tablets. But
Right. That makes a lot of sense. It almost reminds me of um tamas, or sorry, sattvas, tamas, and rajas, the
yeah,
gunas. I just wonder if they're related to that somehow. That's very
it does
interesting.
it does relate to that. Yeah,
Okay.
I think I can't remember exactly. I went into this a while back. I'm getting old. I forget things now. But the three Ayurvedic stages, they also speak or relate to a person's personality, their body type,
Mhm.
which then relates to their digestive system, their skin, their teeth, and everything else. So it's actually an entire system, spiritual system, that looks
Mhm.
not just at what you're eating and your health and stuff like that, but also spiritual aspects of yourself and the times of the day and such things. So we all are different people. So we shouldn't all do the same thing, have the same diet. Um, so, a proper Ayurvedic doctor will be able to pinpoint what you should be doing, the diet you should be taking, and things like that. So again, it's quite involved. I mean, I think the science of it is like 5,000 years old or something like that.
That sounds about right. Yeah. That's
Mm.
incredible. And where do you draw inspiration from to do magic, so to speak? Is there just a certain mood that strikes you? Do you light candles and incense and listen to a certain kind of music?
Um, I think I'll do magic. If we're talking about doing magic as in a daily practice, that's a daily
Mhm.
practice.
Sure.
If it's something like spell work or creating a servitor or whatever I'm doing, that would depend on the situations, obviously. I'll then usually try and line that up with the moon phase and the planetary hours and the planetary days and
Love it.
things like that, just to get the maximum amount of benefit I can out of everything. Um, but yeah, it's kind of a when it's needed. type of
Sure.
thing, apart
Uh,
from the daily practices. Yeah.
apart from daily things, right?
Mm.
And you mentioned servitors. Is that something that you could tell us a little bit about the process of what creating a servitor or like a thought form might be?
I actually did write a book on this, and
Okay.
it's a short book, about 66 pages or something.
Hmm.
But it actually takes it from the perspective of the chaos magician and the Kabbalistic method of the artificial elemental.
Okay.
So they're very similar, but they have quite a different approach. The Kabbalistic method, for instance, what we usually do is you take the Yetziratic wheel, the rose in the middle of the
Hmm.
rose cross. Um, it's got the Hebrew letters, and it's made up of the three elements in the middle. The seven petals cover that, which is the planets, and then 12 petals outside are the astrological zodiacs
Hmm.
symbols. Um, and through a process very similar to sigil magic, but you start with what aspects you need. So it's June, so you would use the zodiac sign for that period. That's the birthing time of the artificial elemental. And then you go into what planetary aspects you want to introduce into the energy of it, and then the element. And then you kind of using the wheel itself, the Etzeratic wheel, you then create a sigil.
Hmm.
And then from that, you've got those relate to the Hebraic letters.
Hmm.
So then you plot those out, and you can create a name from that. So then you've got a name and you've got a sigil for it.
Love it.
And then the creation is very similar. Obviously, it depends on what approach. There's so many approaches you can take to gestation and birthing a servitor. But usually it's just the element that you, or the elemental aspect that you included in the creation and the name and the sigil. You pour breathe that element into yourself, and then you push it out into a little ball of energy. And you program it, you give it its tasks and its name, and you tell it all these things and everything you need to. And then you just, the method I was taught anyway, you swirl your hand over the top and you chant the name, and you carry on doing that, and you speed up and speed up until it becomes frantic, and then you let it go.
I love it.
Um, I love it. It's a method I actually love using.
I love that
It will,
method. I've never
yeah,
heard that
yeah.
before. I've been studying Kabbalah for years, and I have never heard that method. Thank you for sharing that.
It may, saying that it's Kabbalah, it may not be Kabbalah.
Hermetic,
I was,
perhaps.
I was taught this by Yakuba Swat.
Mm.
He's a practical Kabbalist. He's written several books now.
Hmm.
Fantastic books, brilliant books. So this was the method I was taught, and he started the Sangreal Sodality with William Gray. So it may have been a bit of an overlap with that, and not specifically Kabbalistic. But I say it's Kabbalistic because I was being
Sure,
taught practical
sure.
Kabbalah at the same time, so I related to that. Yeah, yeah.
I love that method. And what was the name of the book that you wrote that explains that process?
It's just called Elementals and Servitors.
Awesome.
Yeah,
All right.
straightforward.
I will definitely check that out. I like the simple, sweet and simple approach. Okay. And what are some of your biggest influences? Or I suppose when you think and you reflect upon your past and you say, okay, this is what my practice is, it wouldn't be what it is without these people or these films, etc.
Mm.
Would you share some of that with us?
If I do look back, Yakuba Swat, obviously, he was
Sure.
he's one of my favorite people. Going into traditional witchcraft, Robin Artisan, he started me off down that road, because when I was trying to explore traditional witchcraft, I was very neo-Wicca,
Hmm.
neo-pagan type of thing, and I wanted something a bit more gritty, a bit more
Hmm.
get your hands in the dirt type of thing.
Right.
And I came across his site, Meadows of Alfheim, and it was kind of like one of those those books where you read at the end of the page, and then you can choose which page you want to go to
Yeah, like
next.
a choose your own adventure type style.
Yeah,
Love
his
it.
website was a bit like that, but it took you from like the cottage, where you meet the old witch, to the standing stones or the fairy mound or something like that.
Wow.
So it was what he did. He picked up bits from all different authors, all different traditional witchcraft authors, and he made those the teachings. And then that was my start. And then I got onto, it was Yahoo groups back then, and I got into his groups and just watched the conversations and learned so much from everybody. And then the site disappeared, and I had contact with him in the past. So probably about 3, 4 years ago, I said to him, because back then what we did, well, I mean, we didn't really have internet at home. I did
Sure.
eventually, but I used to get onto the computer in the office at lunchtime and try and study all this stuff. So what I'd do is I would download the whole site as a PDF document so I could read it offline. Okay, this is
Uh-huh.
how we used to do it back then. And I still had that. So I contacted him. I said, "Can I put the site back up? I've still got the original pages." He
Wow.
said, "Go for it." So it's on my website now. So if
What's
anybody
the name of
wants to
that
go,
website?
leewjohnson.com.
All right, nice and simple. Yet again, I love it.
I like the simple.
I do too. All right, I will throw that link in the description. Um, so you mentioned energy work, you mentioned healing, you mentioned creating thought forms and servitors, or what I called them thought forms. Is there anything else that you consider to be a strength or a favorite within your practice that you'd like to add to the list?
I love working astral temple work and journey
Uh-huh.
work.
Uh-huh.
It's probably one of my favorites. I like the idea that you can go to a space which is just created by yourself, and it can be whatever you want it to be.
Certainly.
And it can be as Harry Potter as you want it to be as well.
Yeah.
You know, you want a wand, ping, there's a wand. Um, but I like it because I've, I've spoken to other people who do astral temple work, and it's very similar.
Hmm.
With my astral temple, I've got different doors. So I
Hmm.
go into an antechamber where my higher self is, and then I've got all these doors, and I go through a door to do two different things. So I'm stepping. The astral temple for me is very much my inner space. So I don't want things coming into my inner space.
Certainly.
So I step through a door into different realms, and I've got, Hal's Moving Castle. He's got
Yes.
the he's got the door with the dial, and he changes the dial, and it opens up into different places. I've got one of those in my temple to go into different world trees. So I go into Yggdrasil, or I'll go into a shamanic, upper world, lower world type of tree. So I change the dial and I step into different worlds. I've
Fantastic.
got one where I do demonic work, got one where I do healing work. So it really is just kind of that space where you can make anything happen.
That's a
You know.
really fantastic idea too, because there are some people who would like to keep certain energies separate from others. Some people perhaps
Mm.
angelic and demonic or so-called infernal energies. So that's another way to sort of separate those
Mm.
energies within your own inner world. That's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's just, I don't know, I just find it, you can keep adding to it, and that's the other thing.
Certainly.
If you want to go to this, I've recently created a new door that I step through, and there's this funny little vehicle there, and there's a butler, and I step in, and he says, "Where would you like to go? Who would you like to speak to?" And I'll say, "Whichever god," and he'll zoom off, and I'll step out, and I'm in the realm of that god. So, it's nice to also go to them rather than always bringing them to our space.
Yeah, that's
Go
like
to the
calling
go to
grandma
their
to your
house.
house when you could go visit grandma. It's more
Exactly.
convenient for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And so probably at this point you've been doing it so long that you can just sort of close your eyes and just go to that place. But for people who are still trying to get into the astral plane or do sort of like a shamanic voyaging thing, is there any like tip or trick that you found to be effective when you were first getting started in this?
I still enjoy and I teach the elevator method.
Okay.
Um, so what you do is you just get yourself, breathe for a little while, get yourself into a light trance stage, and then imagine yourself standing up and there's an elevator door in front of you and it opens, you step into the elevator, and then you turn around. And what I do myself, I was taught this again, coming back to Kabbalah, I was taught this as a method to get to the different Sephira, and
Uh-huh.
then step out and you open the door to that realm. So what I do instead of it's from 10, and then I added 0. So you press 0, and then what you do is you breathe in and out. So as you're breathing in and out, you go down and you go into yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You blow yourself into yourself, kind of. And as you go down, you go from 10 down to 9, down to 8, and you go deeper and deeper and deeper, and you get yourself into quite a deep trance state. And then when it gets to 0, the doors open and you step into whatever space you want to create, whether it's just, sometimes it's a void, it can be like have a misty wall and you step through the misty wall into
Mm-hmm.
a realm. So whether this is doing astral temple work or whether it's doing some kind of journey work, shamanic journeying, this is the method I usually teach and use myself.
I
I
love
find
that.
it great.
Go ahead. I'm
Mm.
sorry.
No, carry on.
I
I was
uh I,
finished.
I love how you mentioned like blowing into yourself. I can feel that process happening as I exhale and sort of
Mm,
inhale and collect my energy and then sort of exhale myself into the back of myself or into the inside of myself. I love that
yeah,
technique. I've never heard of that before.
yeah. You kind of go in.
Yeah.
That's just a whole Kabbalistic thing relation to it as well.
Hmm.
Um, but oh, and obviously when you finish, do the reverse.
Hmm.
Come back
Okay.
up,
Yeah.
step out, step into your body, because it is. And we speak about journeying into the astral and taking trips or traveling or journeying into the astral, whatever it may be, and we instantly think that it's a case of lying down and your spirit coming out of your body and you're
Hmm.
unconscious. You go to sleep while your spirit travels. There's a lot of different ways we can journey into the astral, and one is just to sit, get into a trance stage, and do this journey work. So you're still conscious
Hmm.
of where you're sitting, but the deeper you go, the less conscious you become of the physical.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if there's any emergencies or anything like that, you can come straight back.
Hmm.
There's no danger to it. But it's always good just to trace your steps back and sit back in your body and, wiggle your toes and wiggle your fingers, as I say.
Hmm. Wake yourself back up, so to speak. So
Mm.
when you again reflect on your overall practice, are there any specific entities or deities or currents that you feel have helped propel you along the way in your magical practice?
Probably Pan and Hecate.
Okay.
Um, Pan has been around from basically from the beginning, actually. One of the first things I actually did was take a do a path working to meet Pan. Um, so he's kind of stuck around
Hmm.
all the time. Hecate, I had a bit of a battle with. Um, she'd been knocking on my door for years and years and years, and I kept saying, "No, I don't want to know you. Go away." And eventually, I gave in, and I'm glad I did. But I think both of those have been. I think it's different to doing an invocation with a spirit that you want to work with on a particular thing. And a lot of people say they do a deep non with Hecate, for instance, and they felt all this energy and they saw this thing. For me, it's very more like it's a guiding energy. It's not something that's tangibly there.
Hmm.
I know they're there in the background and they're pushing me in certain directions and bringing certain spirits or energies in to help me along. So best way I can explain it, I think.
Almost like a subtle gravity that you can feel the pull of, but you can't really explain the shape or color of.
Mm, kind of, yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, there's also obviously my higher self and my personal daimon, my holy guardian angel, my fetch, whatever term you want to
Hmm.
use. That's there also.
Hmm.
But as far as deities go, there's definitely those two.
Those are certainly some
Mm,
good ones. And
mm.
you also had mentioned working with, not specifically working with demons, but you mentioned demons. Is that something that you've worked with either in like a sort of goetic capacity or a telepathic capacity? Is that something that you're familiar with that you could speak about?
I started working with the Goetia. I keep saying Goetia. But I started working with that, and the other grimoires like, oh goodness, a long time ago.
Mhm.
I'm going to bring up S. Connolly and her
Uh-huh.
works, because I think before her works, it was very sort of hit and miss. But she kind of introduced demonolatry,
Sure.
the term and the practice.
Hmm.
But before then, it was very much trying to follow the practices of the Galatia. And whenever I tried to do that, it felt very disrespectful to the spirits.
Certainly.
And I wouldn't get any results because I couldn't put myself through that.
Right.
So I started trying to find other methods. Aaron Leach is a name that I remember,
Hmm.
who would speak about creating spirit boxes, and actually praying to the spirits, to the gracious spirits, and things like that. So he was a big help. Um, but it was, as I say, it was kind of hit and miss. And then Connolly came along with demonolatry, and it kind of put everything into perspective. And I don't know why I didn't put two and two together beforehand, though, because I mean, if you think about it, I've been practicing witchcraft, worshipping gods and goddesses. So why didn't I just do the same with these spirits? But for some reason, I separated them, and I think it's that kind of mentality of the ceremonial magic versus the witchcraft basis. Yeah.
Yeah. I think cultural conditioning, I don't know if I should say is to blame, but might be the cause of a lot of people's perspective of like, oh, demons are things that are meant to be controlled, as opposed to looking at them as a sort of cohort. I certainly, that resonates with me what you said about the medieval uh, grimoire approach of subjugating the demons and the spirits. That didn't resonate with me. I tried the whole Key of Solomon thing, and like, sure, like I had results, but it just seemed cruel, and it seemed misaligned, and it seemed like I was missing something. And S. Connolly was certainly one of the people that also helped me to see, like, wait a minute, these are just gods or deities in another light, so to speak.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
then
I
you
think
mentioned,
it's my internet okay.
yes, it got a little bit
I think
choppy.
my internet's a bit dodgy.
Yeah, I can still
Mm.
see and hear you. Hopefully you can still see and hear me.
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Well, it seems like we're just on a little bit of a lag here. So you mentioned energy work, and you mentioned some breath work. Was there any other recommended practices for practitioners that you would suggest?
For what specifically? For
Um,
beginners or?
yeah, I would say for intermediate level practitioners.
I think with the intermediate, we've now gone past we should be past the meditation, breath work,
Mhm.
protection, cleansing, visualization, concentration exercises, etc.
Sure.
I think when it gets to immediate, moving into advanced, then you need to start looking at doing inner work.
Hmm.
Um, we've done all the external physical work, the balancing of the elements. We've brought in the planetary aspects and things like that. Now it's time to really start to go inward, um, and start looking at the inner world and matching up the microcosm with the macrocosm,
Hmm.
and seeing where that takes you, because I think that journey will take everybody into a different place. My worldview is going to be different to yours and anybody else's.
Sure.
And I think that's when our worldview starts to become a bit more concrete.
Okay. So
You know,
turning that pentagram into a hexagram, or maybe not turning it into, but sort of ascending from the pentagram approach into the hexagram approach might be one way to think about that.
and a bit further,
and
because
and
I mean,
further,
if we
sure.
relate the well, if we relate the elemental aspects to the pentagram and the planetary aspects to the hexagram, then we've got to then take all of that inside,
Right.
and see where it takes us. You know, down into the pit, into the nil
Uh-huh.
point and the nil center.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you perceive as the greatest difficulty personally as a practitioner?
Astral travel.
Oh, okay. I wasn't expecting that. Okay.
Ast- And actual astral projection and dream work. It's something I've battled with all my entire practice is dream work, lucid dreaming, astral projection, that type, as opposed to, that's why I brought up the idea that when we talk about the astral and moving into the astral, it's not always about lying down and letting your soul connect body type of thing, and doing these lucid dreaming work and things like that. It covers it, but it's not the whole
Sure.
arena. So that dream work aspect has always eluded me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that can be difficult for a lot of people. Um, just integrating the subconscious into the consciousness is it's one of the most important works, I think, as well, and that might be because of how difficult it is for some.
Yeah, it can be very important. I think dream work, because if we start, Carlos Castaneda spoke about,
Mhm,
or Don Juan spoke about stalkers and dreamers, and the approach to the attainment of energy and attainment of power was different for both of them. I'm very much a stalker,
mhm,
or I think what Ken Eaglefeather returned hunter.
mhm,
I think he returned it hunter anyway. So the dreaming aspect for me is very, very difficult. It is a case of you should be able to do both,
right.
but that's just something I really, really need to work on.
I like that
Mm.
approach. I had forgotten um, that perspective from Castaneda. That is a wonderful way to think about it. And as you mentioned, it's probably ideal to approach it from both ways if possible. But I think certainly most of us tend to fall on one side or the other, at least when we first start the practice.
Yeah. Because I think from one perspective, you kind of get an understanding
Hmm.
of what's beneath the surface,
Hmm.
beneath the skin, in the underworld, and things like that. You can move there through meditation. So as I said, you're still conscious, but your consciousness is moving into a different realm. And that's very much that kind of stalker practice or the hunter practice, as opposed to the dreamer.
Hmm.
So you can experience it, you can get to know it, you can get to understand it, but then to really, really envelop the whole thing, then you have to take on both approaches.
Hmm.
If you're a stalker, become the dreamer. If you're a dreamer, practice stalking, stalking the energy itself. Then you really get to the nitty gritty of it. So that's where I'm trying to get to now, battling and swearing and everything else. Yeah.
Right on. So, how important are materials in your practice currently?
I don't really I don't really use materials. It's actually one of the things I kind of learned right at the beginning. So I think I
Mm,
was kind of warded off using tools and stuff.
mhm.
Is one of the first things I ever read was a good magician can sit in the middle of the desert completely naked and do powerful magic.
Yes.
And that kind of stuck with me right through. So I do understand the importance of tools, the
Mhm,
extension of the self, the thought forms you put into the tools, the energy you put in, or the spirits that you can collect from certain tools and things like that. But for my own practice, it hasn't really been something big for me.
mhm.
So
Yeah.
I've got an athame and I've got an altar and everything else, but the athame just sits on the altar the whole time. I don't do anything with it. I've
It's
got
mostly
fingers,
symbolic
you
at
know.
this. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Sword fingers. Excellent. And what are some things to avoid as a
Yeah.
practitioner? Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. Go ahead.
I was actually saying this earlier. I can, yeah.
Mhm.
Sorry, my internet is unstable.
That's okay.
Should we just give it a second or two? Okay. Can you hear me all right?
I can.
Okay. All right. Some things to avoid. I was actually talking about this earlier. Studying is very important. You need to know what you're doing. You need to learn everything that you're going to venture into. But at some point, put the book down
Hmm.
and do the practice. A lot of people will keep saying they're not ready. Um, and if you keep saying that, you'll never do it. And a huge part of learning is the actual experience itself.
Mhm.
So, and making mistakes, you've got to make mistakes. Everybody's got to make mistakes, because if you don't, you're not going to learn. Um, so yeah, definitely just go ahead and do it. Make the
Mhm.
mistakes, know that you're going to make mistakes, and know there's always a way to fix those mistakes. You know,
I think that's wonderful
yes,
advice.
it worries people.
Mhm.
Mm,
Yeah, people are afraid to make mistakes, but at the end of the day, those mistakes are what carve your individual path, I think.
mm, yeah, absolutely.
And how is magic or the occult typically viewed in your area for the most part?
I'm going to say that's difficult for me to say. I'm kind of a hermit. I kind of isolate myself. I live in South Africa,
Okay.
so it is a very diverse country, and there's a lot of understanding, but obviously there's a lot of people who will not get out of the old um, racist, bigoted ways. I think it is a lot more accepting than a lot of other countries. But when it comes to things like witchcraft, we have a culture here which views witchcraft slightly different to what we would view it in as European witchcraft.
Mhm.
And those definitions tend to kind of get a bit fuzzy sometimes and create misunderstandings.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of people working towards trying to clear up those definitions and those misunderstandings, and they're doing a fantastic job. But still, in the more rural communities, they have some quite terrific things that happen to people who are accused of being witches.
Mhm.
Um, but in my own where I am, as I said, I am quite secluded. I
Mhm.
seclude myself, but a lot of everybody I've come across is quite accepting. So I haven't had people doing vigils at my front door or anything like that. Let's put it that
That's good.
way.
I hope it stays that way. So, what is the biggest mistake in your mind that you made as a practitioner? Just off the top of your head.
um, Biggest mistake. I can't think of any because I like making mistakes.
That's fine. We can go with that. And,
Not making enough mistakes.
sure. Okay, I like that. Not testing the metal enough. Are there any films, literature, or music that you would recommend other than the ones that you've already mentioned to help people sort of understand what magic is or could be?
I would definitely recommend American Gods.
Okay.
I'm actually busy rewatching that at the moment, so it's fresh in my mind. And the book is brilliant. If you watch the series, definitely read the book. It blew my mind.
Okay.
I think American Gods is great because it kind of gives you a perspective on the old gods and the new gods. I mean, we have new gods. The
Mhm.
internet, YouTube
Mhm.
is a god. Um, we worship it. We worship it. Its algorithm. We moan and swear about it half the time, but still carry on. Um, but yeah, great series, great book. I was trying to think of some others. Terry Pratchett's fantastic.
I
Very,
love
very
Terry
good
Pratchett.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett are great. I mean, The Sandman's brilliant as well. And also, if you want to let your imagination go into some really weird places, Clive Barker,
Okay.
uh, brilliant, just crazy stuff. Um, the difficulty is when we talk about movies and TV series and things like that, and fiction, they kind of touch on things here and there,
Hmm.
but they get a lot of it wrong.
Uh-huh.
So I don't really want to suggest anything in that area, but definitely American Gods.
Okay.
How, yeah, I think it goes into, um, we talk about the gods were there and then they created humans, and sometimes it's the other way around. We
Huh.
create the gods.
Right.
And this is very very much what Neil Gaiman touches on in American Gods, is that we create them as thought forms,
Hmm.
and we keep worshiping them. So we keep adding that thought and that energy into these gods. So yeah, excellent.
And certainly your own works
Mm.
as well, I'm sure you might recommend.
Oh yeah, yeah, obviously. Yeah, if anybody wants to know which books I've written, so The Reality of Things was the first one, which goes very much into a broad perspective of witchcraft, ceremonial magic, chaos magic, everything. It was written kind of like it was written as a brain dump. I just
Mhm.
wanted to get all the stuff out of my head. But it was written very much for somebody who's trying to find where they land on the path. So if you're attracted to ceremonial magic while you're reading it or witchcraft, then start going down that avenue. And then I wrote The Black Crow, which was supposed to be the kind of the first first order, first degree type of work, which focuses on meditation, visualization, concentration, banishing rites, and things like that. And I've started kind of expanding an expansion series of that, and then elementals and servitors, with respect to that.
Excellent. Those all sound very
Mm.
interesting. And so what's next for you? What are your plans for the immediate future in your practice?
I'm busy creating the Temple of the Horned Serpent,
Okay.
which is going to be very much my own beliefs, my own practices, put into a degree system.
Okay.
Starting with first degree, which is creating the foundation. You've got to have a good foundation to build a good house on.
Sure.
And yeah, so getting people introduced to a daily practice, meditation, banishing offerings, um, you know, elemental magic, servitor magic or sigil magic, and things like that, just to get them going, give them a good basis, and then moving on from there. So it's really in its early stages at the moment. I've also got the egregore project going, which is
Uh-huh.
quite fun and interesting. It's a membership on my YouTube channel actually. It's creating new gods.
Okay.
So it is the birthing of a servitor, which there's a few people that then work with it, and it will become an egregore. We've started with one which is wealth and abundance and things like that. That's going well. So now this month I'm birthing the mercurial spirit, which is also going to be tied very much into communication, electronic communications,
Mhm.
algorithms, and things like that. So um, creating a pantheon of gods, really. So that's quite fun. I'm
It
enjoying
sounds very fun. And do the members
it.
sort of have a say in like what comes next in that, or do you sort of say, here's what I
Mm.
want to do, give me ideas on that, or how does that work?
Yeah, I do ask for their feedback. I mean, before this new one, I kind of gave them I asked everybody. I kind of based it on Peter Carroll's Colors of Magic.
Okay.
Your red magic, which is Mars, your orange magic, which is Mercurial, etc., etc., etc.
Mhm.
And I said to them, this is the kind of spirit we'll be creating in each of these aspects. Which one do you want to do next? And then I get a vote, and then I go ahead and start the work on that one. So the first one we worked with for like 18 months,
Wow.
building it up, giving it more energy. There was a monthly ritual I'd do each full moon and things like that. So
Very
um,
cool.
it's rather interesting. I'm really enjoying it.
And
Mm.
so when you were naming that egregore, did you use the sort of Rosy Cross Layman rose petal layout, or
I've actually used the planetary squares.
oh, the Kamea?
Um,
Cool.
yeah, the Kamea, and together with um, very much taking that type of Yetzeretic wheel and the aspects you want in the planetary aspects, with obviously it's related to Mercury in this one, and then the elemental aspects I want to include in it. So it's kind of a combination of a couple of things, creating a name, deriving numbers from that, and then using the Kamiya to create a sigil.
Very cool.
So,
That's one of
yeah.
my favorite methods. They always end up so
Mm,
magical looking, the sigils that are made from the planetary squares.
mm,
So, was there anything else that you wanted to
mm.
cover that you wanted to add?
Can't really think of anything now. Yeah,
Excellent.
I think we've
Well,
covered a
I
lot.
yeah, we did in a relatively short amount of time. Excellent. I thank you for your time, and I thank you for sharing your perspective and a bit of your life with us. Perhaps maybe sometime in the future, in a few months or a year or something, we'll have you back on to see what's stayed the same and what's changed.
Yeah, that's what was fun. Yeah, that's interesting.
Uh-huh.
How things develop.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks for
I'm
having me on. Thanks for asking me.
not a problem. I very much appreciate you taking the time to do so. I've got a lot of notes here to check out, a lot of things to look into. I'm sure the viewers are going to have a lot to look into as well. Yeah, I wish you well, and again, thank you for coming on, and I hope you have a great rest of the week.
Thank you. You too.
Take care. Bye.
Bye bye. Cheers.